Hi, and welcome to CPO Talks, the podcast that might just make you a chief procurement officer, or at least make you sound like one at your next meeting. Either way, it's packed with so much valuable insights that you're definitely in the right place. I'm Leo, and I'm thrilled you've joined us for this episode.
Hello, I'm Mathilde, and welcome to this purchasing point where we deep dive into one of the many procurement and supply chain hot topics. With Leo, we'll discuss the pain points, the fundamentals, the practical solutions, and share strategies you could implement directly in your work. Think of it as a brainstorming session, conveniently delivered right to your ears.
Can't wait to talk about a hot procurement topic with you today. So tell us about today's menu.
In our interconnected world, we often talk, in purchasing, about the physical flow of goods, the financial flows, and the information flow that enables it all. But that information flow, which is the digital backbone of our modern supply chains, has also become a critical vulnerability. And today, we'll be diving into this topic that has moved from the server room to the boardroom, and that is now on the desk of every procurement professional: cybersecurity in the supply chain.
For sure, that's a huge topic. And I think the nature of the risk has changed because the nature of our supplier relationships has changed. We're not just talking about arm's-length transactions anymore. Many of our critical suppliers operate as an extended workbench for our factories. They are so deeply integrated into our operations that the line between their facility and ours is almost invisible. Same goes for a lot of subcontractors, may it be direct or indirect. This efficiency brings incredible benefits, but I suspect it also often brings hidden risks.
Yeah, I think you've directly hit on a central issue here. That deep integration model is built on a foundation of deeply interconnected IT systems. When that foundation cracks, the whole structure is at risk. This brings us to the threat landscape, and we can start with the most notorious threat: ransomware. Let's take an example that perfectly illustrates your point. In March 2023, a logistics service provider for Airbus Nordenham plant was hit by what appeared to be a major cyber attack. And it was not just a provider delivering parts, but a logistics service provider that potentially operated the full material flow. So we could guess, if the outsourcing was done in full, that both external, reception and shipment, and in-house flows for production were at stake.
I remember reading about that in the press, and if I remember well, it wasn't just a trivial supplier failure. Because of a deep penetration into the IT system, the impact was much more severe, wasn't it?
Precisely. The attack hit the service provider's IT systems. One could guess the target was specifically their WMS, warehouse management software. Some mentioned a ransom of 15 to 20 million euros. Now here's where the deep integration becomes the point of failure. Allegedly, the SAP systems at Airbus were secure, but for the operations planning to work, the system needs to make real-time data calls to the supplier's extended warehouse management system to see what material is available. It's a continuous system-to-system dialogue. When that trusted provider's system was compromised by the encryption of the servers and clients, we can guess after screens went black that the digital connection had to be immediately severed to prevent the attack from spreading. Let's continue the logic. If the data flow connection between the service provider's interface, Coglass WMS according to some research I did, and the user interface, SAP EWM, has been stopped immediately, and as a result, after burning down a few days of stock, as it's common in this industry, I bet that production was partially halted, as automated logistics was completely inoperable. Some sources told me it took about 15 or so days to rebuild the system and the database to be blackmailing-proof and working again to recover the backlog and serve production needs. I guess there must have been massive disruptions, including important delays in final assembly lines for the group. It's a textbook case, among others in the group, where service providers like IDEA or Derischerborg have been attacked, of how your operational continuity is completely dependent on the security of an integrated partner.
That's a terrifyingly clear example. Just let me connect the dots here. Your own house is in order, but the disruption comes from a trusted partner whose systems are essentially plugged directly into your own. It shows the threat isn't just about data loss, but about immediate physical shutdown caused by these complex digital interdependencies. It's a domino effect, starting with a digital vulnerability and ending with a physical halt.
And there are other major risk categories. The second one is the software supply chain attack. Remember SolarWinds attack in 2020?
Not at all. Tell me.
This wasn't about shutting things down with ransomware. It was a silent, sophisticated espionage campaign. State-sponsored hackers corrupted the software update process for the SolarWinds Orion platform, a widely used IT management tool. This meant that by doing something as routine as updating their software, over 18,000 organizations, including major corporations and sensitive U.S. government agencies, unknowingly installed a backdoor for the hackers. From a procurement perspective, it's a nightmare. How do you verify a supplier when the threat is hidden inside a legitimate update from a trusted partner?
For sure, it breaks the trust model. You buy a product from a reputable company, and it becomes the very source of the breach. That reminds me of reading about a more recent attack that had a very direct consumer-facing impact: the Coop supermarkets in Sweden.
Oh, tell me about this one.
A ransomware gang compromised a piece of software called Kaseya VSA in 2021, which was used by IT support companies that thousands of smaller businesses rely on. The attackers pushed ransomware through Kaseya to those providers, and they, in turn, passed it on to their customers. The Swedish supermarket chain Coop was one of those end-user victims. Their payment systems provider used the compromised software, and as a result, 800 stores had to physically close because their cash registers simply wouldn't work. So let me connect the dots here. A vulnerability in a software company impacts an IT service provider, who then impacts a payment system supplier, who then forces a grocery store to close its doors.
Wow, that's a Tier 4 problem that caused a complete shutdown at the retail level. It brings the reality of these attacks right to our doorstep. But in the reality, how can we screen our suppliers'?
Clearly, our security perimeter is no longer our own firewall. It's the collective security posture of the entire supply chain, down to the software vendors your suppliers use. And this sounds like an IT problem. This is where CPO crosses the way of CIO. Why should we, in procurement, the ones who need to lead this? Isn't this their job to handle?
It's a question I've heard debated in many contexts. The technical implementation of firewalls, endpoint detection, and cryptographic standards absolutely lies with the CIO and their IT teams. However, they can't be solely responsible for the risk induced by third parties. We are the gatekeepers of the extended enterprise. Think about it from a system engineering perspective. We are the architects of the supply chain network, and we can decide which nodes to add to our system. We negotiate the service-level agreements and the terms of the relationship.
So basically, referring to how you framed it, we're drawing the map of our own vulnerability. And every time we onboard a new supplier, we are punching a hole in our own defenses and extending a line of trust to that new partner.
Don't get me wrong. For sure, the IT must advise. They can provide tools, but they don't select the supplier and they don't negotiate the contract. We do.
When I started my career in supply chain in the oil and gas sector, the focus was all on security of physical assets, pipelines, refineries, depots. Now I have to recognize that the data flowing between us and a supplier of 55-gallon drums is just as critical and potentially just as vulnerable. Okay, now, if we accept this role as the gatekeepers, what's the first step? What is the first tangible action a listener could take tomorrow morning?
First, not to boil the ocean. You can't immediately impose a top-tier security audit on all of your suppliers tomorrow morning. That would be operationally impossible and alienate many valuable partners. The first step is to perform a risk-based segmentation. It's an analytical exercise within procurement's wheelhouse where you and your team can map suppliers based on their cyber risk profile. This isn't just about spend. A low-spend supplier could be a very high risk. You could ask yourself 3 key questions to start this segmentation. 1. What kind of data do we share with this supplier? Do they have access to sensitive IP, employee personal data, customer data, or strategic plans? The more sensitive the data, the higher the risk. 2. How is this supplier connected to our systems? Do they have direct access to our network? Do they connect via a dedicated supplier portal, or is the interaction limited to email and phone calls? Do they access information through our or their means? Do they supply IT products on top? The deeper the integration, the higher the risk. And 3, how critical is this supplier to our operations? Are they a single-source provider for a key component? What would be the impact of a 1-week shutdown at their facility? The more critical they are, the higher the risk.
Quite similar to how we segment suppliers for strategic relationship management or for financial risk monitoring, in fact. Makes sense. We'd create tiers. 1, high-risk group with the ones who gets early design blueprints and/or are deeply integrated into our project management system, for example. 3, low-risk group with multi-source supplier of standard parts off the shelf with whom the only connection are emails, basically PO and invoice. And 2, in the middle. I guess what's coming next is a differentiated roadmap?
Precisely. Once you have that segmentation, you know where to focus your energy. You can then develop a corresponding strategy for each tier group. Your high-risk suppliers will need to undergo a much more rigorous due diligence process than your low-risk ones. This mapping is the foundational step. It moves the problem from a vague, overwhelming fear into a manageable project with clear priorities. It gives you a data-driven basis for your actions and allows you to explain your strategy to the board, the CIO, and your own team.
Now comes the hard part. How to?
This is where procurement needs to have an efficient partnership with IT security, where we bring the supplier relationship context, they bring the technical expertise. The starting point for your high-risk suppliers is often a standardized cybersecurity questionnaire. You don't need to invent this yourself. There are industry-standard frameworks like the CAIQ or the SIG. These are extensive documents with hundreds of questions that cover everything from access control and encryption policies to incident response plans and employee training. The beauty of a standardized questionnaire is that it's repeatable and comparable. Your more mature suppliers may have already completed one for other customers, which saves everyone time.
Okay, I can see how that works for a large company. They'll have a team ready to answer that. But what about the smaller companies? I'm thinking of a startup we're working with that has developed a new type of composite material. They are brilliant engineers, but they're a team of 50 people. If I send them this type of questionnaire, they'll either ignore it or get it wrong.
That is the classic dilemma, and it highlights why a rigid one-size-fits-all approach is a struggle. This is where your risk-based classification is crucial. For that innovative small-scale organization, you have to apply a different lens. You can't expect them to have the same documented processes as a multinational corporation. So instead of just sending the questionnaire or even a light version and expecting a perfect answer, you use it as a basis for a conversation. The goal isn't just to get a yes-no answer, but to understand their posture. Maybe they don't have a formal incident response plan written down, but if you ask them, what would you do if you came in tomorrow and all your computers showed a ransom note? They might be able to walk you through a surprisingly thoughtful procedure, even though informal. Your target is to assess their actual security maturity, not their ability to produce documentation or reply to questionnaires.
Yeah, in fact, even a perfect questionnaire answer, now that I think about it, is just a statement of intent. To be fair, we would rather need evidence-based validation. So maybe our next layer should be, when relevant, third-party certifications and audit reports. I'm thinking of the gold standard for information security management, ISO 27001. This certification isn't just a technical check, it's an audit of the company's entire ISMS.
For sure. We could just tick the box of ISO 2701 or SOC 2, which is another one, as a prerequisite for RFP's participation, let's say, and sleep well. But that's a trap not to fall into, because it's just a snapshot in time that the organization has a robust management system in place. They have defined policies, assigned responsibilities, implemented controls, and have a process for continuous improvement and internal audits. Certifications are strong positive signals, but it's not a guarantee.
As always, so just let me connect the dots here. My process could be to define the risk category of my panel, start with a questionnaire, follow up with a discussion to understand their context, request and review evidences, may it be certificates or pen test reports, and I assume document all of this for the existing ones and insert it to our onboarding process.
Exactly. And the outcome could be a collaborative remediation plan. You agree to onboard them, but you contractually require them to achieve some targets within a certain period of time. You make security improvement part of their development plan, just as you would do for quality or delivery performance.
So we would not only be gatekeepers, but a partner in their security game. All of this talking makes me think about securing all of that in a contract. Would you agree to deep dive on this?
Yes, and this is why Leo's second best friend after the CIO is the general counsel, right?
Haha, yes. Always in touch with Helene, making sure the verbal agreements and remediation plans discussed during meetings becomes binding.
Isn't a cybersecurity handshake enough? Yeah, more seriously here, the legal team must be involved. Probably our listener will recognize that his standard purchasing terms and conditions from N years ago are no longer relevant regarding our topic of the day, and that there's a need for a robust cyber addendum for the contract to be a powerful enforcement tool. In my industry, things have rapidly moved from best practice to legal mandate.
You're talking about Part IS from EASA?
Affirmative. It's a new set of information security regulations from aviation safety. It's an example of a sector-specific compliance framework. It legally requires all organizations holding an EASA approval, design or production, like OEMs, engine manufacturers, equipment suppliers to maintenance organizations, to implement an information security management system. The purpose is to manage the specific cybersecurity risks that could impact aviation safety. So for us, at the moment, it's not just a good idea, it's the law.
So directly mandating this across the entire sector, that must change the conversation with suppliers in terms of requirements enforcement, I guess, isn't it?
In some ways, yes. It provides a clear, non-negotiable baseline. The conversation with a supplier isn't if they should have an ISMS, but how they are demonstrating compliance with Part IS, giving us a powerful lever in our relationship to mandate that they and their sub-tiers must meet these requirements as a condition of doing business with us. It formalizes the flow-down of security requirements. I don't know to what extent it looks like TSAX in automotive. Do you think it?
Yes, so TSAX is an assessment and exchange mechanism for the information security of companies driven by the German Automotive Association, VDA. While Part IS is a formal institutional regulation, TSAX is a regional industry-driven standard. But in practice, the effects are quite similar. To work with the major German OEMs, you must have this TSAX label. It proves that you have a certain level of security, especially for handling sensitive prototype or design data. So when we're sourcing, we don't ask, "Are you secure?" We ask, "What is your TSAX level?" It creates a common benchmark for the entire panel. My bet is that this is the future trend of every industry.
Agree. I'd bet with you on that one.
All right, so are we at the end of Part 1 already?
Yes, thank you, Leo. And thank you who had joined us for this CPO Talks Purchasing Point episode, Part 1. If you want to suggest us a topic or ask us a question about the topic we discussed today, don't be shy and send us your question on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, or X, or directly in the comment section below this Spotify podcast or video format on YouTube. If you just type CPO Talks in your favorite social network or search engine, you'll find us. We'll be answering all of your questions related to cybersecurity right after the Part 2 episode. If you've enjoyed it so far, feel free to like it or leave a comment, as it's our most precious feedback. You can also follow or subscribe to be aware when the next episode, Part 2, will be published. And finally, you can share this content to your best purchasing buddy. Ciao!